Everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoterica, and on today's episode we got a two-parter for you. First part's going to be on Giga, and the second part's going to be on Mars Matrix. Before we get started, go down below, hit that like and subscribe button, ring the bell to be notified. We really appreciate all your guys' support. So Giga is one of those games where I really enjoy it, but the reviews for this game were only average. It was released in 1999 by Takumi, and it is one of the lesser-known shmups on the system. I say lesser-known, I think most people that have played shooting games will recognize the Giga name pretty immediately. It was available on the CPS2 as well as the Sega Dreamcast, so you definitely can pick it up on the Dreamcast. It plays near perfect. I can't tell any difference, so I would definitely recommend you save the money and just pick up the Dreamcast version. As far as the gameplay is concerned, it's your classic vertical shooter, although it is not in Tate mode, it is played horizontally. It's kind of like a steampunky, futuristic shooter. You got a lot of these different power-ups coming out, so you can do a lot of score combos and chaining, but the kind of quasi-militaristic aspect of it is something that's traditional in a lot of shooting games, especially the 1944 series from Capcom. I'm not sure why this wasn't reviewed as well. It's not the best shooter ever, but the reviews that it got when it came out weren't that great, especially on the Dreamcast. People considered it a decent game, but nothing spectacular. And that's always surprising to me because I actually really enjoy it. Graphically, it's not a ton to look at. There's a lot of bullets on screen and a lot of different sprites moving around, but it's not the most visually amazing game you're going to see on the CPS2 or from that era in general. Additionally, the gameplay is good, but it's not great. But if you actually take the time to play this and give it a really good chance, a lot of the patterns are a lot of fun, and you can definitely have a good time with this game. Now, as far as the collectability of it's concerned, if you're a huge shmup fan or if you're a huge CPS2 collector, definitely pick it up. It's worth your time. Just play it on the Dreamcast, so if you want a copy and you don't want to spend the multiple hundreds of dollars it's going to take you to get an original board, that would be my recommendation. You can definitely emulate it as well. I do see a little bit of slowdown in emulation on this compared to the other CPS2 games. I'm not just sure if that's down to poor coding from the developer or what, but you get a lot of sprites moving around the screen, so it could be something like that. Definitely a game that I enjoy playing though, and I do recommend. It just gets lost in the shuffle of other CPS2 games. You put Giga up against something like Pro Gear, it's going to lose every day of the week, but it's really not a fair comparison because Cave is just the master of making shmups. What I want you to do is watch a little bit more of the gameplay of Giga, and then we'll be back to talk about Mars Matrix. I wanted to show more than just a couple of the heavy-hitting shmup games on the platforms. I want to do a two-part series like we did with Alien vs. Predator as well. But go ahead and enjoy some Giga action, and we'll be back to talk about Mars Matrix when it pops up on your screen. So now that we've shown you Gigawing, we're going to be showing you Mars Matrix, released in 2000, also developed by Takumi. Should have told you at the top of the video that these two games are developed by the same developers, and they are both vertical shooters using a horizontal screen format, which is pretty rare as far as shooters are concerned. It must have just been something Takumi was into. I would say that Mars Matrix is the better of the two games. Also released on Dreamcast, another game I recommend you playing on that console versus buying the board unless you're a collector, because you're going to have a much cheaper experience on that. This game also emulates pretty well on CPS2 emulators. Both these games do have slowdown, and I think it really is down to the developer maybe not having the same mastery of the hardware that somebody like Capcom did. Compared to Gigawing, Mars Matrix uses these pre-rendered 3D sprites, and that was a semi-popular format in the 90s. You have a lot of games for the Neo Geo, AES, and MVS that use that same kind of pre-rendered sprite as well, and you even get Super Nintendo games like Donkey Kong Country that were using those pre-rendered sprites to make things look like they were 3D polygonal models, when in reality they have been compressed down into sprite format. Mars Matrix definitely moves a lot faster than Gigawing, and it's kind of like Gigawing's progression. I enjoy this game much more. The soundtrack's great, the bullet patterns are great, the score chaining and kind of your shield, how that works. Everything about Mars Matrix is just better than Gigawing. You can tell that the developers, Takumi, had a little bit more time to think about what type of games they wanted to make and how to be better at making shmups, and Mars Matrix is the game that you got from that. You even get these little mirrors here that have kind of like a quasi-reflective nature to it. Obviously, they're not really reflecting anything, it's just a sprite, but there's been a lot of care and attention put into the overall gameplay, and how everything looks. You even get those great 2D scrolling top layers just to give you a little bit more depth to the overall image. Now that we're taking a look at the first box, you're going to see all these different bullet hell patterns. Some are very pattern-based and some are very sporadic. You will see I take a hit right here, not to take my first continue. I would say that Mars Matrix is relatively difficult. I don't have as much time into this game as I do something like Pro Gear, but it does give me a little bit more of a challenge. That's definitely something I like in my games, because these things are expensive to collect. You definitely want something that's going to put up a little bit of a resistance that you're really going to have to spend a lot of time with, memorize the patterns, and just get a little more used to the game in general. But I would say boss battles are where this game really shines. They do take a long time. You are on a timer and you need to defeat the boss before that timer runs out. But as far as the patterns, the visuals, everything else is concerned, you get some really great fights in Mars Matrix. Definitely recommend it for the boss fights alone. They're some of my favorites for sure. And you are going to see that I was unable to defeat the boss before that timer ran out, which means I'm not going to get any score bonus for this stage. So if you're looking for that high score, you definitely want to be able to more effectively fight the bosses than I did, because I haven't figured out yet how to beat that boss without the timer running out. You get 6 full stages in the game, and all the stages are relatively long. I wouldn't say it's the longest shmup on the CPS2, but it's quite difficult, and it's long enough that you're going to get a lot of solid gameplay out of it. A real benefit to this game, though, is the soundtrack. It's got this kind of like techno vibe going on, and it definitely marries to the visuals quite well. It just delivers an entire package of visuals, gameplay, and soundtrack. That's something I think pretty special on the system in general. Now, if you do pick this game up on the Dreamcast, I would say it's a little bit harder to control, just because with the analog stick controls on that console, it's really hard to get that fine movement, and I never really loved the Dreamcast D-pad. So if you do pick it up for the Dreamcast and maybe play with a fight stick, just give you a little bit more control over the ship, because there's some definite tight needles that you need to thread in these bullet patterns. Granted, the hitbox on your ship is quite small, so you can definitely use the outer edges of that ship to kind of go through the bullets, and you're going to be fine. But if you want your best chance of actually beating this game, definitely you're going to want to play it on something like a fight stick. But short of that, that's Mars Matrix and Gigawing for the CPS2, both games developed by Takumi. They're both really good shooters. I definitely recommend both. Not the best on the system, but they're definitely worth taking a look at, especially if you emulate them and really don't spend any money. Short of that, really appreciate you guys watching. Next week we have the last game they're going to be showing on the CPS2 before our season finale. Don't worry, we got more good content coming up in Season 6 on a completely different topic. Other than that, if you can do us a huge favor, hit the like and subscribe button. Definitely helps us out. If you want to follow us on Instagram, you can do so at Chicago Game Collector. If you have any questions, comments, leave them below and I'll do my best to answer each and every one of them. Otherwise, have a great weekend. Got a small video coming out on Friday, and we'll be back next Tuesday with more CPS2 content. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great week. Bye-bye.